back to the place where despair is not an option, the Thom Hartmann Program. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your calls in our National Town Hall meeting. Bernie, you're still with us?
Right here.
Okay. John in Dallas, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Well, hello, Tom and Bernie. Thanks for taking my call. I want us to remember back in 2001 when we had this surplus, we said that we would use some of it to spend on paying down the debt, and then most of it we had to return because we had overcharged people. We were going to give them a tax credit, but that was not a good idea because they needed to have more planning. So he said, well, we'll have a more permanent one by putting in a tax rate decrease. And if you remember, one of the senators from Maine said, well, what happens if we don't get the surplus? Maybe we should put a trigger in. Everybody said, oh, no, it's impossible. We can see that this is going to last forever. So they finally agreed that they would put it for 10 years because I guess that's Congress's definition of what forever is. So therefore, the thing is that when we let the Bush tax cuts expire and go back to the 2000 tax rates, what we're really doing is we are finally admitting that we don't have a surplus, and it is not a tax increase.
Well, John, I think you make an obvious and good point, and that is that what happened during the Bush era is the president decided to provide huge tax breaks, a significant amount of which went to the very, very wealthiest people in this country who have already been doing extremely well. And at the same time, and in an unprecedented way, the president went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we went into two wars, and instead of paying for those wars, which we did not, we ran those up on the credit card. We said, oh, by the way, we're going into two wars at huge expense, and then we're going to give tax breaks, including hundreds of billions of dollars to the wealthiest 2% in America. When you do that, when you bail out Wall Street, when you pass a Medicare Part D prescription drug program and you forget to pay for that, it ends up that you're going to have a huge deficit, and that is exactly what happened. So my view is, obviously, we have got to end the tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country who are doing phenomenally well, who do not need those tax breaks, use that money for deficit reduction and to start investing in America, in our energy system, in our infrastructure, to create the millions of jobs we desperately need.
Okay. Kevin in Wilmington, Vermont. You're on the air with your senator.
Hello, Bernie. Kevin Downey here.
How you doing, Kevin? How's Wilmington doing?
Well, we're making progress. There's a few restaurants and businesses that are open on Main Street. However, mine being one of them, we're still waiting on insurance and other stuff, and some buildings may still be lost. But that's not the point I'm calling for, Bernie. It's kind of related. I wrote an email to Governor Shumlin the other day and CC'd you and Senator Leahy and Congressman Welch about a possible avenue for jobs. Flood control was my subject, and we desperately need flood control in this town, and my suggestion was that all these small rivulets that feed the Deerfield River here in town, and this can go for any river, major river in the state, but the Deerfield River rivulets, if we were to make small powerhouse, build dams on these small rivulets that feed the Deerfield and put powerhouses on them, we could not only create jobs, we could create flood control, and we could generate electricity all at the same time, sir.
Kevin, I think that's a very excellent idea. It's an interesting idea. For everybody else, Kevin is in Wilmington, Vermont, which is probably the community in the state of Vermont that was hardest hit, really devastated. I was down there after the flood hit, and it was just incredible to see what happened to their downtown and to a number of their businesses. And what Kevin is saying, which is certainly true for Wilmington, it's true for Vermont, it's true for America, is that if we do some flood control, which is part of what I call, in a broader sense, infrastructure, so that we don't have these devastating floods that cause so much damage every few years. We can put people to work in a very productive way. And Kevin's point here is not only can you control the damage of floods, but in this case, you may be able to have some hydro electricity production, which to me makes a whole lot of sense. But the broader issue that Kevin is talking about, I think, is not only flood control, not only generating hydroelectricity, but is rebuilding our infrastructure so that we become more productive, more internationally competitive, and we create over a period of time millions and millions of jobs. So I think Kevin is coming from the right place.
Russell in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Greetings.
Hi.
Well, Senator Sanders, we have a problem. For all of us who believe in single-payer and civil liberties, in taxing the rich, we have a big problem, and his name is Barack Obama. I don't know if you saw Jonathan Turley's piece in the LA Times today on civil liberties, but he said that Barack Obama has been a disaster, not just for specific civil liberties, but the civil liberties caused in the United States. On single payer, he was against it from the beginning, and he muscled people like you and Kucinich to go along with him. On the Bush tax cuts, which you just talked about, they're now the Bush-Obama tax cuts because he went along with them. So I'm getting a little fed up with Democrats talking about these problems and not addressing this issue. What are we going to do about Barack Obama, who's perhaps, one of the worst presidents of our generation?
Well, I think, Russell, I would agree with some of what you said, obviously, as we have talked on the show a whole lot. In terms of Wall Street, in terms of the economy, in terms of taxes, in terms of civil liberties, the president has clearly been disappointing to many people and nowhere near as strong as we had hoped that he would be. I believe he ran one of the greatest campaigns that I've ever seen in my lifetime. He inspired people, galvanized people, brought people together. But for whatever reasons, he has not followed through with a lot of the issues that he discussed in his campaign, and I think has not stood up to the right-wing extremism that is so potent in Washington right now. And the answer is, what you're asking is, what do we do? Well, the only thing that I know to do is to rally the American people around the progressive agenda. I mentioned a moment ago that Obama was waffling on Social Security. He was talking about cuts in Social Security. Well, you know what? I think he has heard from large numbers of people, I don't know how many, all over this country who are saying, excuse me, Social Security has not contributed one nickel to the deficit. Do not cut Social Security. And you know what? He's not talking about that anymore. And we got to put pressure on him in terms of Medicare. We got to put pressure on him in terms of a strong jobs program. In the last couple of weeks, he has been sounding more progressive than he did a number of months ago. Is he saying what he should be saying? No. Is he going a step forward? I think he is. His jobs program, which talks about infrastructure, is good. We need more money into it. We need to rally the American people to understand that investing in energy, investing in infrastructure, asking the wealthy to start paying their fair share is what is not only morally right to do, but is what will get us out of this terrible recession. So, Russell, the only thing that I can say is what politics is about, what Democratic with a small d politics is about, is rallying the American people, making elected officials or candidates an offer they can't refuse. And that is, if they don't go forward, they're not going to get support.
Sherry in Oklahoma City, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes. Hello, Senator Sanders. It's a pleasure to be able to listen to you and to ask you a question. I just heard about something the other day, and I don't know if it's correct or not. It was about an infrastructure bank where people can invest in that at approximately 5% return on their money. The money would be secured by the government, and the funds would be used to build our infrastructure. It would also serve to take some of the money away from Wall Street, where they cannot gamble with retirement funds and people's 401ks. Do you know anything about this?
Well, what I do know, Sherry, is there has been a lot of talk about an infrastructure bank. If my memory is correct, the president proposed putting $10 billion into that bank. The idea of the American people investing in that bank and getting a decent rate of return, I don't know what it would be, I think is a good idea. You're involving the American people. You're having them invest in something that's good for the country that will create jobs. So I think that is a sensible idea. So to answer your question, Cherry, I don't know all of the details, but yes, there is a lot of discussion about, A, investing in infrastructure, rebuilding America, B, and specifically an infrastructure bank.
It would be almost like when I was a little kid at school, we got these paper things where you could put quarters in periodically to buy, ultimately, bonds in the United States to help build.
That's right. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a good way for people to invest that helps them rebuild our country and helps us move away from this terrible recession by creating good-paying jobs.
Yeah, and we just have 20 seconds to the break. Is no specific legislation that you know of?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there is. John Kerry of Massachusetts introduced the concept. Others are talking about it, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
Great.
The fastest way to create jobs right now is to rebuild our infrastructure.
Yeah, put people to work. Absolutely. Senator Bernie Sanders with us on the line. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with more of your calls for Senator Sanders in our National Town Hall meeting, the Brunch with Bernie hour. 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website over at sanders.senate.gov. A lot of great information there. It's a great news source. And our Brunch with Bernie hour, Charles, watching us on Free Speech TV in Georgia. Charles, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good morning, Senator Sanders. How you doing?
I'm great, Charles. How are you?
Oh, good. I just want to. I got a comment that I would like to make. I guess it's kind of a question. I'm approaching 68 years old, and I've been very active in the political process in this country for quite some time. And with all the problems that we have, and seeing how our government and government officials have worked in the past, why aren't there more folks, groups out here, and people in Congress out here stand up and realize that the only way that we're going to get anything changed in this country is somebody going to have the strength to come up and put some term limits on you guys up there so they can't be bought. They put term limits on the president, and until this country decides that we're going to put term limits on those guys up there so that they can't be bought no more than 2 terms up there, we're going to see some changes in this country, and we're going to see some changes in the world. So I just want to know what's your opinion about that, and is that something that you could support?
Okay, well, Charles, the answer is no, and I will tell you why. In fact, term limits would likely make a bad situation worse, because what you will end up having is a revolving Congress, people coming in, people coming out, and the folks who will remain for the 20, 30, and 40 years will be the lobbyists who surround the Congress, who will be telling the new members all of the time what they should be doing. The problem is, you do have term limits, and that is that the people of America can throw out any person who's up for election if they don't like them. The problem is not, in my view, term limits. The problem is campaign financing, which enables the big money interests to provide unlimited sums of money to candidates they want to support, who are prepared to support the agenda of big money. And Citizens United has only amplified and made much worse what has already been a very bad situation. So Wall Street, big corporations can now, in secret, put huge sums of money into the campaigns of people they like or try to defeat people who they don't like. So what I would say to you, Charles, is the issue is not, you can get rid of people every 4 years, so what? The new guys are going to come along, be beholden to big money interests, not going to make a whole lot of difference. The real issue is moving toward public funding of elections so that we can have working-class people, middle-class people, people who are prepared to stand up and fight for ordinary people, have them get elected, rather than people who are beholden to the wealthy and the powerful.
The Elizabeth Warren types, the Bernie Sanders types, for that matter. Bernie, we just a little less than a minute left, so it wouldn't be fair to bring another caller in here. Further thoughts on that? How do we bring that about?
Here's what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, Tom, almost all of the questions come down to a certain reality. People are extraordinarily frustrated and angry and disappointed at what's going on in our great country today, and they should be. And the only answer that I know is how we break out of this is you educate and you organize, you elect strong people at every level of government, you hold them accountable. You cannot turn away from the political process. Every one of us has got to be deeply involved.
Amen. Amen to that, sir. The Thom Hartmann Program, and it's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us, taking your calls. Middleton in West Virginia. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Mr. Sanders.
Hello, Middleton. How are you?
Okay, I'm called from West Virginia, too, and that other guy that just called from Berkeley Springs,
yep,
he's a Republican. He wasn't talking about what you was saying. He was talking on the Republican side. He wasn't a Democrat.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to make a comment. There's something that, do you know that the Chinese is buying up all the scrap in the United States, because I worked in a steel mill. I'm now retired. And we had to pay a big price for every bit of scrap we bought because the Chinese was getting it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I figure they're still doing it. And, and that really hurts our manufacturers because they have to pay a big price for scrap, so that means they have to raise their prices.
Well, Middleton, I think you're touching on a point that sometime, Tom, we should spend maybe a whole show on it, and that is the Chinese economy and what they are doing, the impact they're having on the United States, and how we can effectively compete against them. One of the issues that I feel very strongly about, and Tom and I have discussed this for years, is our disastrous trade policy with China and with other countries, which has enabled major corporation after major corporation, you name the company, General Electric, you name it, shut down in the United States and move jobs to China, and then we bring those products back tariff-free. Middleton talks about scrap metal, but we can amplify that in a dozen different areas. The Chinese government is doing what it can for its people, and that's their job. But I want to see the United States government begin to do what it can for its people, and that is that we have trade policies which protect American workers, do not just work for large CEOs, which are based on fair trade principles, not unfettered free trade principles. For years now, whether it's NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, we have had trade policies which have resulted in the loss of millions of good-paying jobs in this country. As I've mentioned before, in the last 10 years, my friends, we have lost 50,000 factories in America. Go out to your store today. Go out to your department store. See how many products you can purchase that are made in the United States of America. We are working very hard in my office trying to begin to reverse that. But it has everything to do with trade policies. It has everything to do with corporate welfare, which literally gives money, gives subsidies to corporations who are throwing American workers out on the street. So how we compete effectively against China, who, by the way, is investing 9% of its GDP in infrastructure, while we're investing 2%. They're building airports. They're building high-speed rail. We're not doing that because our Republican friends are more interested in giving tax breaks to billionaires than rebuilding our infrastructure. This is a huge issue, which has got to be dealt with if we're going to rebuild the middle class and create a decent economy here.
Jonathan in New York, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello?
Jonathan, you're on the air.
Yes. I have about the Dodd-Frank bill. During around that same time, there was a Return to Prudent Banking Act that would have also repealed Gramm-Leach-Bliley that allowed the banks to, allowed the bank to merge.
Right. You need to turn your TV or radio down because there is a time delay, Jonathan. It'll totally confuse you. So are you suggesting should we go back to Glass-Steagall?
Yes, Glass-Steagall and the Bank Holding Company Act.
Okay.
Well, I think as somebody who, when I was in the House, was a member of the Financial Services Committee and fought very, very hard against Alan Greenspan and that entire mentality of deregulation. In general, I agree with what Jonathan is saying. What you need to do is certainly re-regulate Wall Street. You have to end that highly speculative activity. But you have to say, if people want to speculate, let them speculate, but they're not going to have the government there to protect them and bail them out. On the other hand, what you need is a strong commercial bank system which says that when people put deposits into a bank, those banks are going to invest in small businesses, invest in our productive economy, and we are going to protect those banks, but they're going to be regulated. So in general, I certainly do agree with what Jonathan is saying, and which speaks to the need for real Wall Street reform. And again, I would suggest that when you have 6 major financial institutions controlling 60% of the assets of our GDP, then we need to start breaking those guys up as well.
Okay. Steve in Brattleboro, Vermont. We got about a minute and a half here. Quick question for Senator Sanders, for your senator.
Yes, Senator. All right, I live in Brattleboro, and of course we're right there by the Vernon. And I understand that the United States government insures the nuclear power plants. If they're so interested in cutting the budget, why don't we cut that out?
Well, that's a very good point, Steve. What there is a provision. It's called the
Price-Anderson Act.
Price-Anderson Act. That's right. That's exactly right, Tom. And what Price-Anderson says, if God forbid there is a nuclear disaster, the industry will pick up a certain amount of the cost, but if it becomes too large, the United States government will be there to pick up some of that liability. Interestingly enough, our friends in the nuclear sector who, when we say, well, why don't you go to Wall Street? Why don't you go to the private insurance companies to get that insurance? The answer is they can't get it because the private insurance companies will not provide it them because it's just too risky. So I think that Steve makes a very, very good point. And that's just one of the many ways, Steve, that the federal government is promoting nuclear industry. Right now, some of my colleagues in the Senate want to have tens and tens of billions of dollars in loan guarantees for new nuclear power plants. But without the strong intervention of the federal government, I doubt that we would have much of a nuclear industry today at all.
Yeah. Bernie, the last 20 seconds, 30 seconds, thoughts for our viewers and listeners?
Well, I just would urge people to pay a lot of attention to what's going on in Washington right now. We have the super committee dealing with deficit reduction. Our demand has got to be that you do not balance the budget on the backs of the elderly, the children, the sick, the poor. There are ways to move toward deficit reduction by asking the wealthy, large corporations to start paying their fair share, take a hard look at military spending. A lot of stuff, Tom, that's going on. I hope people pay attention.
Well said. Thank you, Bernie.